Hi, welcome back. Today we have another Q&A episode where I try to answer some more of your questions. We will talk about sitting position, how to find your own style in music, how to stop that handpan from slipping off your lap, how to create your first composition, music as a path, and more. It's a lot to talk about, so let's get started.
I'm a beginner and have no musical background. It's very difficult for me to jam with other handpan players and other instruments. Can you give me some basic ideas, techniques, and principles on how to do this?
I'm planning a Friday episode about this subject, but a few pointers to get you started. First, listen before playing. Second, play less. And third, take on different roles. For example, one of you guys to play the rhythm and the other person to play the melody. That can make it much easier in the beginning.
I'm curious about your daily practice routine. Do you have any advice about how to manage playing time? Can you give us an idea of what you usually practice and how?
I have a 1-year-old daughter, so I don't have a lot of practice time at the moment. Actually, I think I never had as little as I have right now. Part of the time I take care of her. And in my music time, for the time being, I either compose or I work on the Friday videos. So there's not much time for technical exercises. Thankfully, after many years of regular practice, technique kind of settles. It doesn't go down anymore as it used to when I take a break from practicing. And if I do get a little bit rusty, usually things can be refreshed pretty quickly. I can share with you some ideas that help me to make my practice more effective. First, switch off the phone, close the door, and really reserve this time for you and the instrument. No distractions, no Facebook, no WhatsApp, Twitter, whatever. Get rid of all these distractions for this time. Second, spend a certain time every day on technical exercises, maybe half of your practice time. No matter if you feel like it or not, go through your suite of technical exercises. And then in the second half, practice creative things. Take the techniques you work on, the patterns you work on, and create music with them. Improvise, compose. Because you want to build up your technique, but not in a vacuum. You want to put everything in musical context as soon as possible. Third, write a practice plan. Mine would look, for example, like this. So you reserve a certain time for each of your exercises and you go through these every day. That way it's really easy to feel your progress. And you can even document it. For example, write down which BPM you're comfortable to play a certain pattern. That can give you a nice feeling of achievement because you see every little progress you make, which is very motivating.
I'm wondering about creating songs. For example, playing 2 or 3 minutes without it getting boring. What's your advice when playing 15 to 20 minutes at a time in order to keep the listener in the loop but not change to too many different rhythms? How do I get rid of the feeling that I'm stuck in the same mood and melody in the diatonic scale? How do I work with dynamics in a composition?
All of these are super interesting questions, and I will go into them in some of the upcoming Friday videos. For now, I'll give you a few bullet points that maybe can get you started. First, think about structure, even when you're improvising. Second, create contrast, and a big part of that is the use of dynamics. And third, especially when you want to play a longer piece, take your time with building things up. Sometimes it's enough to add one sound or one little melody fragment at a time.
I have difficulty to get a rhythm going, especially when I try to speed up. Do you have any advice? I have a problem. I can pick up patterns quickly, but I tend to forget them. Do you have any tips to boost my memory?
I think the key is really to get the different patterns into your body, so your hands and fingers know how to move and your mind doesn't have to constantly supervise them. It might also be helpful to figure out what kind of learner you are. If you're a visual learner, it can help to visualize the notation of a pattern and to write the different rhythms down. If you work mostly through listening, just focus on what a pattern sounds like. Me, I'm primarily a haptic learner, so I remember what the movements feel like. If you can figure out your strengths here, you can really focus on that, and that can help you to remember the different patterns as well.
Sometimes I lose the offbeat feeling when playing all the ghost notes, and I feel limited in speed. How many of them are useful?
That is a very good question indeed, and I can't answer it in one sentence. It really depends on the speed, on the tempo you play. In slow and medium tempo, it can often sound nice if you fill everything with constant ghost notes. But once you come to a certain speed, it often doesn't sound good anymore and it gets very challenging technically. I have a chapter in my level 3 course about the subject called How to Play in 120 BPM, because that's a very tricky tempo where the ghost note approach often has to change. Let's check out an example. Let's check out different options for the ghost notes with this example of a backbeat style groove. I will start to play it in medium tempo, where it still sounds good to play constant 16th notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now let's speed up the pattern to around 120 BPM without making any changes. 1, 2, 3, 4. It sounds okay, but to my ears a little rushed. And it starts to feel a little rushed as well as a player. Let's check out the same pattern without any ghost notes. This one sounds also okay, and in some musical situations might be a valid choice, but it is a little empty. Now let's check out what it sounds like when we fill the pattern with 8th note ghost notes. Okay, that works pretty nicely. I want to try one more thing, something that is between the 8th note and the 16th note approach, and that supports the high energy but doesn't feel busy. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, Kata. Even though I couldn't give you a very simple answer to your question, I hope listening to these different options in regards to ghost notes can help you decide which approach you like once you hit the tempo threshold where constant 16th notes don't sound good anymore. My personal favorite was the last one.
What's the right position to play this instrument? It seems rather large on my lap.
Hey Christina. Yeah, I know this issue from some of my students. If you're not very tall, it can be difficult to manage the size of the instrument. The first thing you want to do if you play with the instrument on your lap is to make sure that you have a horizontal playing surface. And you might have to bring your feet up. You can do that by either using the chair, for example like that, or by simply putting something under them. But if you don't have long arms, it can still be difficult to reach around the instrument comfortably. I had one student who was quite small, I think she was around 150. And at some point, she simply decided to always play with a stand. It can look like this, or you can get a model that goes even lower. And this simply gives you more options regarding the placement of the instrument in relation to your body. So maybe give this a try and see if it feels more comfortable.
When I watched your live stream, I noticed that you were wearing 2 dark patches around your legs. Are those anti-slip patches to keep the pan in place? What are they made of? Would you reveal the secret?
You're absolutely right, Susa. These are anti-slip patches, which I can strap around my leg for playing. They were made by my friend Julia Surba. Before we went on our first Russian tour, Nadishana and I were trying different options to prevent the instruments from slipping, which can be an issue, especially if you use your legs and feet to play foot rattles and stuff. And this is what she came up with. It's a really wonderful solution, and I've been using it ever since. It's made mostly of a mouse pad-like material, and it has a thin layer of leather on the side. We jokingly called them the European hangmaster devices because that's what the Russian promoters called us on the posters. If you know your way around a sewing machine, you can make them yourself, or you can contact Julia. She has agreed to make them available for sale. I will put her contact in the video description.
What's the best way to find my own style? Shall I practice lessons and videos or compose songs and rhythms? Hi David, I can't create any of my own music with my handpan. I always try to play the same melodies from tutorials. I love this instrument so much, but I'm kind of stuck and losing my interest. Please tell me what to do.
I'd say there are at least 2 different ways you can go about developing your own style and finding your own voice on the instrument. Let's call them the solitaire method and the sponge method. My friend Nadishana is a perfect example for the solitaire method. He never took a music lesson in his life, and he developed his skills by listening to music and then experimenting by himself, trying to imitate the sounds and patterns that he heard. This was before the rise of the internet, even before CDs. This was the time of tape recorders. It's a difficult route to take learning music, and I admire very much what he achieved. He is an absolute virtuoso today and sounding unlike anybody else. Needless to say, if you haven't checked him out yet, do so right away after you finish watching this video. I will put a link to his YouTube channel in the video description. In my case, I used the sponge method. I studied different music traditions with different teachers, and I took inspiration from all of them. That way, you create your own musical language as a kind of mosaic from the different things that you learn, and of course your own ideas on top of that. With everything you learn, don't just copy. Try to understand the underlying ideas, the building blocks of the music. That can be a pattern, a technique, a harmony sequence, a concept. Try to understand what makes it work and why you like it. Then use those building blocks in your own creative process. Add new melodies, jam around, find ways to change and twist them. That way you also start creating your own music right away. If that is challenging for you, here are a few tricks that can help. First, after you learn a new part, switch instrument to a different scale. You often can use a similar pattern, but you will have to be flexible and make changes, and wildly different things can come out. Second, rotate your instrument a different way. You can play either with the lowest note or with the highest note of the circle in front of your belly button. Or you can even rotate it 90 degrees. And this forces you out of your comfort zone and come up with new patterns. Third, start from scratch and compose your own piece of music. I know this can sound daunting, but it really doesn't have to be. Start with a simple groove, add some simple melodies. Your first compositions don't have to be masterpieces. But it's great just to get the process started. And it's a lot of fun as well, I promise. You can see examples of this in my videos on playing in 7. Some of those pieces in there, they start exactly the same way. I will put some links in the video description.
How do I improve control on accents and ghost notes? I found that if I'm trying to play faster, my ghost notes start to sound like tacks. How do I solve this issue?
First of all, it's really good that you hear and pick up on these details. That's the most important skill to have when you want to improve. I would say repetition, 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 a lot of practice, and then switch between faster and slower playing. Always go back to the slow playing, where you can focus and pay attention to every single stroke and make sure it's as clear and defined as it should be. Sometimes you will realize that there are always the same strokes in a pattern that give you trouble. And in that case, I would isolate this segment. So it could be maybe 2 or 3 or 4 strokes, and you can just practice them by themselves and loop them. That can be very helpful as well. Finally, record yourself. This is quite frustrating in the beginning because you will pick up on many little inconsistencies yet that you don't realize while you're playing. But once you find them, you can also improve and polish them.
My question's about music as a path. Do you think a musician can miss the chance to express their potential by ignoring it for too long? Or do you think that if it's in you, you will, by your own passion, not be able to stop yourself walking that path? To make it practical, at some point, do you think someone needs to make some commitment to practice and show up to that every day with a level of discipline that allows their art to flower? Or do you think if it's meant to be, the very passion itself will be the driving force, and if it's not happening, best to just let it be? Also, how to manage having inspiration to play multiple instruments practically with practice, etc.
Hey Jesse, well this one really got me thinking, and I was pondering what advice I could give you. It's a complex and personal question, and I don't know you. The path of doing music full-time or as your main thing is not an easy one, and I generally wouldn't recommend it if you don't feel drawn towards it strongly. But if you have this nagging in your mind to go into this direction, well, I can't tell you what is the right choice for you, but I would like to give you a challenge instead. Pick one of those instruments that you like, that you play, and give yourself half a year of dedicated practice. Let's say 2 hours a day. No matter if you feel like it or not, if you want to pick up another instrument, if you want to do something else, you can do all those other things, but only after your 2 hours. Make this your top priority. I think if you go through with that, the answer to your question will become clear for you. Regarding playing multiple instruments and getting distracted, I had a really good piece of advice from one of my teachers when I had the same question many years ago. He said it's totally fine to play multiple instruments, but it's important to pick one and to go into it very deeply. This experience will benefit you as a musician in general and also with every other instrument you pick up afterwards. I'm sorry I couldn't give you a straight and direct answer to your question, but I really hope this can help you to figure it out for yourself. And if you decide to take my challenge, please let me know and keep me updated how it's going for you. Okay, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Next week I have a special announcement to make. Until then, have a good practice and stay healthy.